There is something in your chest right now that has been waiting. Not patiently, it gave up on patient a long time ago, but persistently. The way water finds the crack it needs before the wall ever knows it's there. The way a voice gets louder and louder in a room where no one will turn around, not because it's angry but because it is running out of time. You may have come here today thinking this was about mindset, about the words you say to yourself in the mirror, or the affirmations you've been told to repeat until they finally take root somewhere. It isn't that. What Jung understood, and what took the rest of the world the better part of a century to catch up to, is that the conversation most people never have is not the one with their therapist, or their partner, or even their most honest journal entry at 2 in the morning. It is the one with the part of themselves that stopped using words entirely, because when you don't listen, the psyche doesn't quit. It doesn't fold. It doesn't decide you were right to ignore it and quietly disappear. It relocates. It moves from the mind, where you could argue with it, reframe it, think your way into a more manageable interpretation, down into the only thing you cannot edit, your body. The tight chest that shows up on Sunday nights for no reason you can name. The back that gives out at the worst possible moment, always the worst possible moment, as though it has a sense of timing. The jaw you find clenched at 2 in the morning when you were certain you'd been relaxed all day. The stomach that has been quietly, insistently, specifically wrong for longer than you can actually remember. This is not malfunction. This is the most precise communication happening anywhere in your life right now. Carl Jung called the method of entering into direct, deliberate dialogue with unconscious content active imagination. In plain language, it is the practice of speaking to the parts of yourself that have no other way to be heard. Not speaking about them from the clinical safety of a reflective distance. Not analyzing their origins or cataloging their symptoms. Speaking to them, the way you would speak to someone who is standing directly in front of you, who has been standing there for years, who is beginning to wonder if you can see them at all. By the end of this you will have something concrete, not a mantra, not a reframing exercise, a way of talking to yourself that is older than therapy, more precise than positive thinking, and more honest than anything the self-help industry has ever packaged into a morning routine. A method that has been practiced by the most serious students of the inner life across centuries, and given its clearest psychological architecture by Carl Jung. What has been trying to reach you has been speaking through your body for one reason only. You left it no other door, and it has been knocking, in the only way it knows how, ever since. You know this feeling, not as a theory, as a fact you carry around inside a life that otherwise looks completely functional. You wake up and the tiredness is already there waiting for you. Not the clean tiredness of someone who simply didn't sleep enough. That kind resolves. This is the other kind, the kind that lives underneath sleep. Underneath the weekend that was supposed to fix it, the vacation that didn't, the good stretch of weeks where nothing was technically wrong and still, behind all of it, behind the competence and the showing up and the getting through, there is a weight you cannot locate well enough to put down. You have tried, you know what it feels like to try. Hold that for a moment. Don't move past it, just let it be true. The second thing is quieter, and you may not have given it a name yet. There is a version of yourself that you present to the world. Dependable, composed, the one who handles things without making it anyone else's problem. And then there is a version of yourself that exists in the half-second before you decide how to respond to something you weren't expecting. In that half-second, something true flickers, something that isn't composed or dependable or carefully calibrated for the room you're in, and then you edit it. You have been editing it for so long that the editing now happens before you're even aware a choice was available. The real response, the one carrying the actual weight of what you feel, never makes it out of the room. You got very good at this. The people around you mostly don't know you're doing it. Some of them have decided you're simply easygoing. Some of them have decided you're the stable one. You have never corrected either impression. The third thing is the one that brought you here today, even if you didn't frame it to yourself quite that way. There is a persistent low-frequency sense that your body and yourself are not on the same side, that the body is failing you, betraying you, complicating a life that you are working very hard to hold together. The pain that doesn't resolve, the fatigue that doesn't lift, the symptoms that cycle without a satisfying explanation, they feel like interference, like something broken in the machinery that runs the rest of your days. What Jung would tell you, what his clinical work across 4 decades confirmed, patient after patient, symptom after symptom, is that this sense of betrayal is the most understandable misreading of a loyal act you will ever make. Your body has not been working against you. It has been working for you in the only direction left open to it. Here is the mechanism, and it matters that you understand it with some precision. Jung described what he called psychic energy, libido, in his vocabulary, though he used the word far more broadly than Freud ever intended, as the total motivational force of the psyche. The energy that moves through you when you feel something, when you want something, when you grieve, when you rage, when you hope with the particular ache that hope carries. It is not a metaphor. It is functional, and it has one absolute requirement: it needs to move. When it can't, when the grief has nowhere to go because grief wasn't permitted in the house you grew up in, when the anger gets swallowed because anger in your experience meant something dangerous was about to happen, when the fear gets quietly renamed being realistic because fear felt too exposed, too needy, too much, that energy does not evaporate. It does not accept the refusal graciously and dissolve. Energy doesn't disappear, it converts. It turns inward. It goes looking for a container with the same persistence that water finds a crack. And the body, loyal, patient, constitutionally unable to lie, becomes the last available one. The tension in your shoulders is not bad posture. The knot in your stomach before certain conversations is not a clinical anxiety disorder waiting to be diagnosed. The exhaustion that no quantity of sleep touches is not laziness, not weakness, not some obscure deficiency you haven't identified yet. These are expressions of psychic energy that has been turned away from every conscious channel, and has finally, with nowhere left to go, settled into the walls of the house itself. This is not weakness, this is not dysfunction, this is the psyche doing exactly what it was built to do when every other door has been closed from the inside. You are not broken, you are backed up. And the distance between those two things is not small. It is the entire difference between a life spent managing symptoms and a life spent finally understanding what the symptoms have been trying to say. If this is already reaching something real inside you, if something in your chest or your throat or your gut just shifted slightly as you heard this, leave 111 in the comments. Not as a ritual, as a way of marking the moment for yourself. The moment you stopped treating your body like the problem and started wondering if it might be the most honest thing about you. Because here is what changes now. If the body has been holding what the mind refused, if the symptoms are not the obstacle but the message, then what comes next is not more management, not better coping strategies dressed up as healing. It is something far simpler and considerably harder. It is the conversation you have never had, with the part of yourself that gave up on language, moved into your chest and your back and your jaw and your gut, and has been waiting there, with extraordinary, almost incomprehensible patience, for you to finally sit down, place your hand on it. And I'm here. Tell me what you've been carrying. Your body has been performing for a long time. Not in the way you perform, the careful regulation of tone, the managed expression, the version of you that assembles itself each morning and shows up to everything that requires showing up. Your body learned that performance too eventually. It learned to keep moving when it wanted to stop, to hold itself upright through conversations that cost considerably more than they looked like they cost from the outside, to carry the full weight of a life being lived correctly, responsibly, functionally, with all the appropriate appearances intact, without ever once being asked if it was okay with the arrangement. It was not okay with the arrangement, but it kept going, because you needed it to, because there was no other option that didn't involve everything coming apart, and because the body, above everything else, is loyal in a way that has no parallel anywhere else in your life. What it could not do, what no body in the history of human bodies has ever been able to do, is hold indefinitely without consequence. Jung observed this with the consistency of a physical law across decades of clinical work. The psyche does not abandon what it stores, it keeps everything. And when the storage fills past a certain point, it does not overflow randomly, the way a bucket overflows when you tip it. It selects locations, with a precision that, once you understand the logic of it, stops feeling like coincidence and starts feeling like cartography. The body is making a map of everything that was never allowed to move. The throat holds what could not be said. The specific words that were swallowed in the moment they most needed to be spoken, the truth that would have changed the room and so never got to leave your mouth, the need that felt too large and too exposing to name, the no that became yes again because yes had fewer consequences. All of it accumulates in the muscles and connective tissue of the throat, tightening around the unspoken the way a fist closes around something it has decided it will not release. The shoulders hold what was taken on without consent, the responsibility that arrived before you were old enough to understand you had the right to decline it. The emotional weight of other people, their states, their instability, their unprocessed material, that migrated onto you so gradually that by the time it was fully settled it felt like your own. You have been carrying it for so long that it no longer registers as weight, it registers as posture, it registers as just the way you stand. The lower back holds survival fear, the chronic low-frequency dread about money, about stability, about what happens to the structure of your life if the thing you've built on a particular foundation turns out not to be as solid as you needed it to be. It lives there because the lower back is the structural base of the physical body, the architecture that holds everything else upright. And so the terror of foundational failure goes exactly there. Into the foundation the chest holds grief, longing, the love that accumulated and had no place to land, the losses that were never given a proper acknowledgement, the relationships that dissolved without closure, The versions of yourself you quietly left behind because the person you were becoming required it. The futures you buried in the middle of the night because they stopped being available and no one gave you a ceremony for the loss. The chest holds all of it in a compression that gets mistaken for poor posture, for chronic stress, for simply the way things are now and probably always will be. The stomach holds the anticipation of judgment, the preemptive contraction that arrives before you've even walked into the room. The background vigilance of a person who learned early that being seen could mean being found insufficient. Every space you entered scanning for signs of disappointment in the faces of people whose approval felt necessary. Every conversation where one part of you was fully present and another part was monitoring, constantly monitoring, for the moment when too much of you would show and someone would decide that was a problem. That vigilance, exhausting, constant, so automatic you've stopped noticing it, lives in the gut. These are not metaphors dressed up as science. Jung documented these patterns with clinical rigor across his career, and the somatic therapists who came after him have mapped them with increasing precision in the century since. The body does not select its locations arbitrarily. It is building an argument. It is pointing, with the specificity of an expert witness, at what has gone unmet, unacknowledged, unfinished. And here is the moment you may have already had, even if you filed it away under coincidence. Think about the last time a very specific tension arrived at a very specific moment. Not a general tiredness at the end of a long week, something more precise than that. The headache that appeared not because you were dehydrated, but because you spent 2 hours sitting across from someone who required you to be smaller than you actually are. The fatigue that came crashing in not after physical exertion but after an hour of performing okayness in a situation where nothing was okay and your entire nervous system knew it. The back that went out not randomly but in the exact week when something you had been successfully not thinking about finally became impossible to avoid. You noticed, and then you explained it away because noticing felt like the beginning of something you didn't have time for. But you noticed. That noticing is not hypochondria. It is not the imagination of someone who has spent too much time in wellness spaces looking for meaning in symptoms. It is the beginning of the conversation that Jung spent his entire career teaching people how to have with themselves. What he called a complex, an emotionally charged cluster of memories, feelings, images, and associations organized around a core wound, does not live in the abstract realm of thought. It lives in the body first. The thought is the aftershock, the symptom is the original signal, the outermost layer of something that has been waiting, with a patience that puts yours to shame, to be genuinely met rather than merely managed. Your body has not been attacking you. It has never, not once, been attacking you. It has been asking, in the only language it had left after everything else was taken off the table, to be included, to be brought back inside the full conversation of your life instead of being used as the vehicle you drive to get through it and then park and ignore until it needs something. Sit with that for a moment before we go further. Not as a concept, as a fact about the relationship between you and the body you have lived inside your entire life. It has been loyal. It has been precise. It has been asking, and you are here now. Which means something in you already knew it was time to answer. You have spent a long time trying to manage this. The supplements researched carefully at midnight. The stretching routine maintained for 3 weeks and then abandoned. The sleep hygiene protocols, the dietary adjustments, the cutting out of things that might be contributing, the adding in of things that were supposed to help. None of that is wrong. Some of it helped in the specific and limited way that addressing the surface of something helps when the thing itself runs considerably deeper. But if you are honest, and you are more capable of honesty than you have been giving yourself credit for lately, you know that the management has never quite reached the thing itself. Not all the way down. You have been treating the messenger with impressive diligence and then wondering quietly why the messages keep arriving. What changes now is not the treatment. It is the direction you are facing. Instead of turning away from the sensation, instead of the habitual move toward distraction, toward the next item on the list, toward the kind of forward motion that keeps you too occupied to feel what is running beneath the occupation, you turn toward it, completely. With the quality of attention you would give to someone you love who is trying to tell you something they have been trying to tell you for a very long time. This is what stillness is actually for, not passive rest, not the absence of productivity dressed up as self-care, precision. The unconscious communicates through channels that the hyperactive, overscheduled, notification-saturated mind simply cannot access. The noise of constant activity is not neutral, it is a structure that, whether you built it intentionally or not, functions to keep the deeper signal from arriving. When you get still, you are not doing nothing. You are, for perhaps the first time in a long time, creating the actual conditions for the conversation to happen. Here is the practice, not the concept of the practice itself. Tonight, when the house is quiet, or tomorrow morning before the day assembles itself around you, find the place in your body that is holding something. You already know where it is. You have known for a while if you're honest about it. Sit with it. Place your hand there. Not to fix it, not to will it into releasing, not to demonstrate something to yourself about how committed you are to healing, simply to make contact. The way you would place your hand on the shoulder of someone who has been sitting alone in a room for a long time, waiting for someone to come in, and then speak to it. Out loud if you can manage it. In a whisper if that is all that's available, either counts. The body registers intention before it registers volume. Say, I see you. I know you have been trying to reach me. I am sorry it took me this long to stop moving. I am here now. Tell me what you need. And then, this is the part that requires the most from you. Wait, don't fill the silence immediately. Don't rush to the interpretation you already have prepared. The explanation you've already decided is probably accurate. Don't manage the moment. Wait with genuine, undefended openness for whatever comes. It may arrive as an image that surfaces from somewhere you weren't expecting. A memory with an emotional charge attached that has nothing obvious to do with the present. A feeling without a clear source. A single word. A pressure in the tissue that shifts just slightly. The way something settles when it has finally been acknowledged. Whatever comes is information. Receive it the way you would receive a letter from someone who has been trying to reach you across a very long silence. This is active imagination in its most essential, stripped-down form. Jung did not design this as a technique for the spiritually inclined or the psychologically adventurous. He designed it as a rigorous method for anyone serious enough to make contact with the unconscious contents that cannot be reached through analysis alone. The body is not a metaphor in this practice. It is the entry point. It is where the unconscious has already established its address, and it has been there long enough that it has started to feel like home. What this is not, and this distinction is worth being precise about, is positive self-talk. Affirmations operate on the surface layer of the mind, placing new statements carefully over old patterns in the hope that repetition will eventually do the work that depth hasn't been invited to do. What you are doing in active imagination goes underneath that surface entirely. You are not trying to convince yourself of something better. You are trying to hear something true. The direction is reversed. You are not broadcasting at the unconscious. You are for perhaps the first time genuinely listening to it. The body knows the difference before your conscious mind does. It responds to genuine presence and genuine emotional honesty in a way it has never once responded to performance. You cannot manage your way into this conversation. The moment you begin steering it toward a conclusion you've pre-approved, the moment you start editing the response before it fully arrives, the channel closes. What it requires is the one quality that is hardest to access for people who have spent years being very, very careful. The willingness to not know what is coming next. To sit in that not knowing without immediately filling it. Most people never try this because the not knowing feels like danger. It is not danger, it is the threshold. The place where what you have been carrying finally gets to put itself down. And here is the thing that changes when you begin to practice this. Not in some theoretical future, but in the days and weeks after the first genuine attempt. Something in the version of yourself you've been living as starts to loosen its grip. The one who handles things. The one who is fine. The one who keeps moving because stopping feels like it might reveal something that the whole structure was built to avoid. That version has served you. It has kept you functional during periods when falling apart was genuinely not an option. Acknowledge it for that. It earned its place. But it was never the whole of you, and, somewhere underneath the management and the performance and the perfectly maintained surface, the whole of you has been waiting with the same quiet persistence as the body. It is time to let it back in. You are not the same person who pressed play on this. That is not encouragement. It is an observation about something specific that happens in the psyche the moment a person shifts, even slightly, even tentatively, from relating to their body as a problem to be solved to relating to it as a participant in a conversation that has been waiting to happen. That shift is not decorative, it is structural, and it has already occurred in you, even if the full edges of it haven't made themselves felt yet. Consider what it took to reach this moment. Not this video, this particular point in your life. The point where the question of what your body has been holding finally feels more urgent and more honest than the question of how to make it stop. Most people never arrive at this particular question. Most people escalate the management until the symptoms escalate past what management can contain, and that becomes the only path to the conversation. The fact that something in you kept looking, kept reaching past the explanations that almost fit towards something that fit all the way, is not accidental. That is individuation at work. And it was working in you long before you had a word for it. Individuation is the word Jung used for the lifelong movement toward becoming a whole integrated self, not a perfected self. Not a healed self in the sense of a self from which all difficulty has been removed. A whole self, one in which what was split off has been brought back into relationship with the conscious personality, not because the split material is pleasant, but because wholeness requires it. And here is what most people miss about individuation. It is not a psychological process that happens purely in the mind, it cannot be. Because the split material, the grief that was never completed, the anger that was never allowed to move, the fear that was renamed and rerouted, lives in the body, not as a metaphor for where it might eventually be found. As its literal address, becoming whole requires going there. It requires bringing the body back into the conversation of the self, not as a vehicle that carries the important parts from place to place, but as a full participant in what it means to be you. You have been doing this. The recognition you felt in phase 2, the moment when accurate description landed in you before you had words for why, that was integration beginning, not completing. Beginning. The psyche does not require a perfect process or a pure motivation or a completely undefended heart. It requires a genuine opening, even a small one, even one that immediately wants to close again from the sheer unfamiliarity of being that open. You gave it one. That is enough to start. Here is what begins to change when the inner dialogue becomes honest, genuinely honest. Not honest as performance, not honest as the version of transparency that is still carefully managed for an internal audience. Sleep shifts first, not dramatically, and not because you have resolved anything, but because the body, once it has been genuinely heard even once, does not need to work as hard when the lights are out. The nighttime is when the unconscious is loudest, the racing thoughts, the 3 a.m. inventory of everything unfinished, the dread that arrives without a specific object, and it is loudest at night precisely because the daytime, with all its activity, offers it no channel. When you begin opening that channel during daylight hours, the nights get quieter, not silent, not immediately. But there is a different quality to the 3 a.m., less like something demanding and more like something breathing. Then energy shifts. This one surprises people. It comes slowly, in patches, and then one morning you notice that the underneath tiredness is slightly less underneath than it was. Not because your circumstances have changed, because the energy that has been running continuously in the background, maintaining the suppression, holding the lid down on the container, that energy is becoming available for other uses. This is not poetic language. The physiological cost of chronic emotional suppression is measurable. The sustained low-level activation of the stress response, the constant microtension held in the musculature, the immune system carrying a load that was never part of its original job description. When that cost begins to reduce, you feel it as something returning that you didn't know had left. Then the quality of decisions shifts. This is the subtlest change and probably the most significant one over time. When you stop making choices from the part of you that is managing, performing okayness, avoiding the thing that might crack the surface, choosing what keeps the structure intact rather than what is actually true, you begin making choices from something older and more reliable. Something that feels less like strategy and more like recognition. This is right. This is not mine to carry. This is what I actually want. The body, when it has been reinstated as a participant, turns out to be one of the most precise instruments available for this kind of knowing. It has always known. You were simply not in the habit of asking it, and it had stopped volunteering the information because volunteering the information had never seemed to change anything. And then, not quickly, not on a schedule you can predict, the nature of your relationships begins to change, because the energy you carry into other people's presence is different. You are no longer arriving as someone who needs the relationship to confirm that the suppressed version of themselves is acceptable, is enough, is worth the space it takes up. You are arriving as someone who has already done a portion of that confirmation work internally, in the quiet, with one hand on the place that was asking. The presence that comes from a person who is no longer primarily performing, who has some genuine contact with their own interior, is something other people register before they have words for what they're registering. It changes the rooms you walk into in ways that have nothing to do with what you say. Let's be specific about what you no longer need to do, because sometimes the most clarifying thing is not what to add but what to set down. You no longer need to outrun the body's signals. The headache, the tightness, the sudden fatigue in the middle of the afternoon. These are no longer malfunctions to be corrected before they affect your performance. They are brief dispatches from a correspondent you are now in relationship with. I hear you. Something is here. I'll come back to this when I can. That is enough. The body does not require hours of your attention every time it sends a signal. It requires the acknowledgement that the signal was received. That alone changes the dynamic. You no longer need to perform okayness when okayness is not the truth. This will take time because the habit is old and the muscle memory runs deep, and the porpoise's been so seamless for so long that distinguishing it from genuine okayness requires a level of interior attention that feels almost foreign at first. But every single time you catch yourself about to say I'm fine and pause, for even 1 second, to check whether that is actually the case, something in the system relaxes. The performance costs energy in a continuous, invisible way. Even private honesty, honesty that no one else ever witnesses, returns some of that energy to you. You no longer need to treat the symptom as the adversary. The pain is not the problem. The pain is the pointer. And a pointer, once you have genuinely looked in the direction it is indicating, has done what it came to do. It does not need to be punished for trying to help in the only way available to it. It needs to be thanked quietly, the way you thank someone who delivered a difficult message at some cost to themselves. The body has been a loyal correspondent throughout all of this, writing letters you kept returning unopened, sometimes for years. You are opening them now, and the response it has to finally being heard, not cured, not managed into silence, but genuinely heard with something approaching the tenderness it deserved all along, is a softening that happens in layers over time, not all at once. Jung described it once as watching a fist that has been clenched for years begin slowly to open. The first opening is the hardest. The knuckles ache. The muscles resist from sheer unfamiliarity. And then each successive release comes a little more naturally, a little less costly, until one day you look at your hand and realize it is open, available, no longer organized around the holding. This is where Jung's understanding goes somewhere that most frameworks, including many good ones, are not equipped to follow. Because what he was pointing at was not a technique for symptom relief. It was not a method for achieving a calmer relationship with your nervous system, though that is one of its effects. It was a fundamental account of how the psyche is structured, and what it requires in order to move toward integration rather than continuing to accumulate what it cannot process. The mechanism that makes this movement possible has a name, the transcendent function. In plain terms, the transcendent function is the psyche's built-in capacity to hold two opposing realities in tension simultaneously, without resolving the tension prematurely in either direction, and to sustain that tension long enough for something genuinely new to emerge from the space between them. Not a compromise, not a splitting of the difference, something that could not have existed without both of the opposing realities being fully present and fully honored. I am in pain and I am whole. Both true. Simultaneously, I am exhausted and I have what I need to continue both. Simultaneously, this experience damaged something in me and I am not reducible to what was damaged. Both true. Simultaneously, the transcendent function does not ask you to choose between these pairs. It asks you to hold them both with the full weight of both, for long enough that something new can form in the tension creates. Not as an intellectual exercise, as a lived experience of sitting with what is actually true, all of it without collapsing into the easier position. This is not spiritual bypassing, which rushes past the reality of pain toward the idea of wholeness, using the language of healing to avoid the actual encounter with what needs to be healed. The transcendent function does the opposite. It requires you to stay with the wound and stay with the wholeness, not alternating between them, not using one to escape the other, but holding both at the same time with the kind of psychological steadiness that is genuinely hard-won. It is, Jung believed, the most sophisticated operation the human psyche performs, and it cannot be activated by thinking. It cannot be activated by intellectual understanding, no matter how precise. It is activated specifically by the quality of inner dialogue, by honest, feeling-based, genuine contact with what is actually present, which is why the words matter. Not as affirmations encoding a desired reality, as acts of contact with the actual one. I see you. I know you've been trying to reach me. I'm here now. These words work not because they are optimistic. They work because they are true to the moment, true to the genuine willingness to stop, to turn, to make contact with something that has been asking for it. The body registers that truth before your conscious mind has finished forming the sentence. There is something else Jung returned to consistently across his career that is worth holding as you move forward with this practice. He documented, across decades of clinical work with patients from radically different cultures and backgrounds, that the experience of carrying unprocessed emotional material in the body is not a personal failure or an individual pathology. It is the oldest human pattern in existence. Every generation that came before yours learned in some configuration specific to their time and place and family, that certain feelings were dangerous. Dangerous to the structure of the family, dangerous to the social group, dangerous to the relationships and dependencies that kept everyone alive. The suppression was not weakness. It was intelligence operating under constraint. It was the most adaptive response available to a person in a situation where feeling fully would have cost something they could not afford to lose. You are part of that lineage. What you carry is not entirely, not even mostly, original to you. The tight chest, the grief held in compression, the anger that was never permitted to be anger. Some of what lives in your body arrived there already formed, passed through the nervous systems of the people who raised you, who received it in turn from the people who raised them, all the way back through a chain of human beings who were doing exactly what you have been doing, the best they could with what they were given, in circumstances that did not always permit the full range of what it means to be human. You are the one who gets to finish it, not as a burden you were handed without your consent, though in some sense you were. As a completion you are in a position to make, one that reverberates back through the chain and forward through whatever comes after you, in ways that are real even when they are invisible. The collective unconscious, the layer of the psyche shared across all human beings, containing the accumulated patterns and wounds and wisdom of every person who has ever lived, is not a weight you carry in isolation. It is the context that makes your specific experience legible as part of something larger than personal history. You are not uniquely broken. You are not even unusually damaged. You are deeply, specifically, entirely human, and the work you do in honest conversation with your own body, one hand, one sentence, one genuine act of contact, does not stay contained within you. It moves, in ways you may never see but that are no less real for being invisible. So here is what you carry out of this. The most consequential conversation you will ever have is not with another person. It is not the confrontation you have been rehearsing, or the explanation you owe someone, or the difficult thing that still needs to be said in a relationship where too much has gone unsaid. It is the conversation with the part of yourself that ran out of options, ran out of channels, ran out of ways to reach you through the mind, and moved into your body and waited. It is not a distant aspiration. It is not something that requires a certain level of healing already achieved before you're eligible to attempt it. It is available to you tonight, in the quiet after everything else has settled, with one hand placed on the place that has been asking for your attention longer than you've been willing to acknowledge, and one honest sentence, spoken with genuine feeling rather than the kind of hopeful performance that the body sees through immediately. I'm here, I'm listening, I'm not going anywhere. That is the beginning and the practice, and with enough time and enough repetition done with real feeling, eventually the arrival. Everything Jung understood about the inner life points toward this one act, not the understanding of his concepts, not the ability to name what you're carrying in the correct psychological vocabulary, the act of turning toward it, the act of staying when everything habitual in you wants to get up and move to the next thing. The paradox that runs like a current through all of Jung's work is this: you do not heal by fixing what is broken. You heal by finally meeting what has always been whole. The body was never the problem. The body was the only part of you that refused to perform, that held the line on what was actually true when everything else was willing to negotiate with appearances. The silence around it, the years and sometimes the decades of managing, outrunning, suppressing, performing, treating the symptoms as the enemy while the underlying conversation went unanswered. That was the problem. And silence, unlike the pain it was meant to prevent, is entirely within your power to end. You don't need to end it all at once. You don't need a 30-day commitment or a restructured morning or a perfect practice maintained without interruption, or it doesn't count. You need 1 minute, one hand, one sentence that is genuinely meant, spoken into the specific place in your body that has been carrying the most weight for the longest time. The body will know you mean it. It has been waiting for exactly this. Not for you to be healed enough, not for you to have the right words or the right framework or the right therapist guiding you through it, just for you to stop. Turn around and be there. That is the whole practice at its core. Everything else is elaboration. If something in this video reached you, if there was even one moment where something tightened or released or went quiet in a way that felt like recognition, take a moment right now, before the next thing claims your attention, and let it land. Don't analyze it yet. Don't turn it into a plan. Just let the recognition be real for 30 seconds. And if you know someone who has been carrying something quietly for a long time, someone whose body has been speaking in ways they haven't had a framework to hear, share this with them. Not as an assignment or a prescription, as a door left slightly open. The kind of door that a person can choose to walk through when they're ready, because someone they trust thought it might lead somewhere worth going. If this work calls to you, if Jung's map of the inner life feels like something you want to keep following, subscribe. There is more of this. The map is large. The territory is deeper than any single video can reach. And this channel exists to make that depth accessible to anyone willing to make the descent. Your body has never lied to you. Not once in all the years you've been living inside it. It has only been waiting with a patience that should honestly astonish you. For you to be brave enough, and still enough, and honest enough, to finally hear the truth it's been holding.